China is using the slave labor of persecuted and imprisoned Uyghurs to make the medical PPE and face masks the rest of the world now needs because the Chinese government let the coronavirus spread outside of their borders. And these mandatory mask laws coming to North America, they're going to be made possible by Chinese communist slave traders. First things first, friends, let me be perfectly clear so that YouTube doesn't take this video down. I'm not at all giving medical advice. I'm not giving you advice about whether or not you need to wear a mask. Wear one if you want to, or if you're forced to, or don't. Let's all just mind our own business and take care of ourselves and make choices for ourselves. But for the love of God, if you do choose or are forced to wear a mask, please make sure that mask is not from China. Now, because you're smart, plugged-in people, you probably already knew this much. A number of European governments have already rejected Chinese-made equipment designed to combat the coronavirus outbreak. Why, you ask? Well, look at this. Thousands of testing kits and medical masks are below standard or defective, according to authorities in Spain, Turkey, and the Netherlands. Dutch Health Ministry announced it had recalled 600,000 face masks. Dutch officials said that the masks did not fit and that their filters did not work as intended, even though they had a quality certificate. Now, Canada's not immune. Canada got some of those defective masks too, over 1 million of them. Swabs also. The Canadian government bought them from China for medical use after Justin Trudeau sent Canada's strategic supply over to China at the height of the pandemic. However, the masks and swabs that came to us were either contaminated or not fit for medical use. But friends, if you need it even more convincing that Chinese manufactured masks are a terrible idea, let the information I'm about to give you push you over the finish line. Look at this horrific information in the New York Times. A Times video investigation identified Chinese companies using a contentious labor program for Uyghurs to satisfy demand for PPE, some of which ended up in the United States and other countries. Now, what's a Uyghur? If you don't know, please blame the mainstream media because these people, they don't fit into the government's pro-China narrative, so they are rarely spoken of. Chinese Uyghurs are a peaceful Muslim ethnic minority. They're ferociously persecuted alongside Christians in China. In Canada, the Uyghur expat community has been protesting Huawei as the surveillance arm of the Chinese state, and the Uyghurs here have been demanding the release of 2 imprisoned Canadians taken hostage by the Chinese state when Canada arrested the Huawei CFO for bank fraud at the request of American officials. Now, Uyghurs in China are in the middle of a modern-day genocide and no one seems to care. They're forcibly sterilized, their organs harvested and sold, their children are taken to residential schools to unlearn their religion and culture, and they are, as you will learn about today, traded as slaves, treated not as human, but as the machinery to make your convenient disposable face masks. Now, back to that Times article. As the coronavirus pandemic continues to drive demand for personal protective equipment, that's PPE, Chinese companies are rushing to manufacture the gear for domestic and global consumption. A New York Times visual investigation has found that some of those companies are using Uyghur labor through a contentious government-sponsored program that experts say often puts people to work against their will. Uyghurs have long been persecuted by the Chinese government, which says its tight control over Xinjiang, that's the Uyghur province, is necessary to fight what it calls religious extremism. In response to the Times, the spokesman for China's embassy in the U.S. said the program helps local residents rise above poverty through employment and lead fulfilling lives. Oh, okay, I see. They aren't slaves in concentration labor camps working under the threat of death. They're being fulfilled right out of poverty through unpaid forced labor to enrich the state. Yeah, thanks, China. Very satisfying. And the labor here, folks, is definitely forced. Look at this. Quotas on the number of workers put into the labor program and the penalties faced by those who refuse to cooperate, however, mean that participation is often, in effect, involuntary. There are these coercive quotas that cause people to be put into factory work when they don't want to be, said Amy K. Lair, the director of the Human Rights Initiative at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. And that could be considered forced labor under international law. The companies produce equipment primarily for domestic use, so within China, but the Times identified several other companies outside Xinjiang that use Uyghur labor and export globally. We traced a shipment of face masks to a medical supply company in the U.S. state of Georgia from a factory in China's Hubei province where more than 100 Uyghur workers had been sent. The workers are required to learn Mandarin and pledge their loyalty to China at weekly flag-raising ceremonies. The program is widely publicized in state media as a form of poverty reduction. The Human Rights Investigation Lab at the University of California, Berkeley, and the Uyghur Human Rights Project have both collected dozens of videos and social media reports that document the recent labor transfers. So, social justice warriors of the world, think about this after your next BLM protest. But before you end up screaming at some innocent soul in the grocery store because they aren't wearing one of those mandatory masks. To meet the supply of masks required for the mandatory mask laws you're trying to force on free people, you could be condemning even more Uyghurs to labor camps. You could be complicit in their suffering. Your demands fueling their continued imprisonment. The Chinese mask that these social justice warriors want us all to wear is the product of slavery and systemic racism they claim to fight. For Rebel News, I'm Sheila Gunn Reid. Friends, if you'd like to sign our petition telling the government to keep Huawei away from Canada's 5G network, please go to banhuawei.com. This is your chance to stand with the Uyghur community who say that Huawei is the surveillance arm of the Chinese state. Again, that's banhuawei.com.